Day 2 of New York Jets training camp is in the books, and by all accounts, number 2 overall pick David Bailey was the headlining story today in Florham Park. So we bring on someone who was on the scene at One Jets Drive today to talk all about what's transpired throughout 2 training camp practices for the New York Jets. It's the great Antwan Staley joining us coming up right here on a Thursday edition of NY Flight Jets Talk.
This is NY Flight Jets Talk. We're kind of long. NY Flight Jets Talk. We're talking Jets, 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 Jets. NY Flight Jets Talk with special guests. NY Flight Jets Talk. Here's your host, Connor Long. Jets, 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 Jets.
What is going on, New York Jet fans? Hello, everyone. Welcome back here into another edition of NY Flight Jets Talk as we come to you guys live right here on this Thursday evening, July 30th. Thank you all for hanging out with us right here on the channel. Hit like, hit subscribe on your way into the building. It is completely free and continues to help us grow right here on the program. And joining us on this Thursday evening following day 2 of Jets training camp, you know, I'm beat writer for the New York Daily News, the great Antwan Staley, giving us some of his time. Antwan, what is going on? Training camp has officially started. Something to talk about at the very least.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of feel like, well, I took vacation, but you kind of see like similar type stories like from everybody and everything. So it's good to kind of, get things back rolling there. And then as we trend towards the first preseason game.
Yeah, absolutely. So 2 days now in the books of training camp. I feel like there have been 2 different storylines the past few days. Yesterday, the first practice, just starting to really get acclimated, nothing much. And I mean, they're still not in pads yet, so there's not too much to take away, but there was the performance of David Bailey. Before we get into today and just Bailey's dominance, anything that's kind of just stuck out to you in particular these past 2 days combined as something that's correlated both these practices?
No, not really. I mean, I think it's you're kind of just seeing how Glenn is kind of with the defense there. I think a lot of people are saying, a lot of the players are saying like he's even more intense, as a defensive coordinator, defensive play caller than he was to just being a coach. So, I'm kind of monitoring that and just kind of, what they're doing, from a schematic standpoint too, as well. And then, obviously everybody wants to talk about, David Bailey, obviously Cade Klubnik too, as well. So, but yeah, not a lot to take away from it. Like, I think we'll take more away from it once they get in pass, but yeah, just kind of, the nuances of the new offense there with Frank Wright, and then also just the effect on Glenn is having on their defense.
Yeah, I mean, obviously people are going to talk about what went down today with Bailey, and then Klubnik, from by all accounts, had a nice day out there. It's just overall, you mentioned it with Glenn. I think a lot of the value that these players have gotten throughout the course of the offseason program, now you're starting to see it ramp up even more with training camp, is learning the new system. Like, I was looking back on some of these guys, and Garrett, who was talking to the media and you guys yesterday, it was pretty depressing to hear him say, like, my goal is to play meaningful football. But it's true. Since he was drafted, there has been, only a handful of meaningful football games that this organization has played. Breece Hall and Garrett have had a new offensive coordinator now every single year throughout their career. So just so much turnover there. The offense and the defense both have new play callers. So I think overall the value, Antwan, that we're starting to see take place and has kind of been in full effect since the offseason period of training began, is these guys are starting to learn the new system. And I think that's more valuable than anything you're really going to see in terms of like a highlight play or a big splash on the field.
Well, Garrett, Garrett really hadn't played any meaningful game outside of probably his rookie year, where I think
with Chris Trevler against the Jaguars on Thursday night or whatever that.
I mean, by that point they're just about they're done at that point. But I think he's not used to losing. Like, he's talked about that in the past, especially coming out of Ohio State and playing in Texas and all the success he had in high school. So this is obviously a big change for him. But it's depressing, I'm sure, especially for somebody that, knowing by the time December hits, like, you're completely out of it. So, I'm sure it's frustrating for him. And Breece Hall got 2 guys that have been here through the ups and downs, and seeing, guys like Aaron Rodgers come through there, the expectations raised, only to not fulfill those expectations. But, they feel like it's a little bit different this year, just simply because it's not a lot of headlines regarding the Jets, and they feel like they have a good enough team that they can be able to take advantage of that. I do on paper. I think they're better, at least from the defensive standpoint
Yeah.
too, as well. I like what they've done in the front four, especially getting more beef in there, getting guys like Sweat. Obviously, we'll see what he looks like once he hits the
Mhm.
field there. Another guy, Daryl Jackson as well. And then offensively, you think Geno could. Nobody's expecting Geno to just be, the top 10 quarterback this year. But if he can
Mhm.
just stabilize the position and also give his receivers opportunities to get the ball down the field, something that I don't think Justin Fields did a lot of last year, I think you'll see a little bit of upgrade there in the passing game.
Combining what you've heard and been able to report on, coupled with what you've seen take place not only these past few days, but throughout minicamp and OTAs, what is the QB2 battle looking like in your eyes?
I mean, it is really, say like it's between Zappi and Klubnik there. I mean, it's still early. Like again, no pass on, but Klubnik is doing a solid job. I mean, I'm not going to say he's doing a great job because again, like the speed, you kind of go at half speed and everything like that. But I think he's doing doing what he's supposed to be doing. He's not making mistakes there. He's throwing the ball where he's supposed to there, and it seems like he's getting better and better. It seems like even going back to rookie minicamp and OTAs and obviously minicamp. So I don't know if he's going to be the backup quarterback, number 2 quarterback. That's to be determined there with the preseason and obviously being in pass. But I definitely think he is off to a solid start so far.
Yeah, I wrote about this the other day. I feel like just to begin with, and I know last we heard from Glenn on who had the job, it was Zappi penciled in, and that was before training camp begun and everything like that. But I just think on the surface, Klubnik has a leg up because the Jets have a 4th-round draft commitment to him. They traded up to land him. Zappi, it's a different situation. He's on a futures contract, someone they brought in January. They don't have that level of commitment or something as valuable tied to him. They could let him go, no issue. And I feel like even if Zappi outplays him in the preseason, but the difference is relatively small, maybe the Jets want to carry 10 or 11 offensive linemen and instead of going thin there at 9 or carry an extra defensive lineman or carry an extra linebacker. So I just think Klubnik has the leg up to begin with because he's a roster lock no matter what. Zappi isn't. So if he just gets completely run off the field in the preseason and just doesn't look like he could hold his own against NFL competition, sure, I understand you then go with Zappi. But if the difference is relatively small, I could see the Jets gambling on Klubnik and trying to optimize that other roster spot.
I mean, here's the thing, too. It's a few things. One, I mean, if you have Klubnik, too, like, do you really want him play? Like, if something happens to Jado, God forbid, is he prepared to play? Like, I think you have to. I know a lot of Jet fans would probably want him to play just because, like, that would could represent like a higher draft pick. But the problem is, like, one, Aaron Glenn's trying to save his job. So you have to keep that in mind too. And, he might want a veteran in there. I think it might be, depending on who gets released, final cuts or whatever, I think they're going to keep an eye on that too. Just, I know Darren Mucci didn't really say a whole lot in regards to that, but I imagine they do their due diligence and just see who might become available as the preseason goes on. I think they're going to pick up a veteran backup somewhere. I think it's hard to go in there with a rookie quarterback that you took in the 4th round. And and all the questions surrounding Geno and everything like that. Because again, like if something happens to him, he's your guy. And you don't want a situation where you have like a Brady. I think Klubnik would be better than Brady Cook was last year. But having said that, you don't want a situation like that where the outlook looks like that or similar to like what it was last year. So it's going to be his first really game action, especially high-profile players. So you might not want him playing, that quickly, at least in the league there.
I get what you're saying 100%. The good news is injuries could happen at any time. There could be a freak issue that happens in week 1, and then you're caught with your pants down if you don't have a plan or a veteran in place who can come and steady things. The good news is Geno is not someone who has an injury history. Since becoming the Seahawks starter in 2022, he's missed just 4 games. It was 2 this past year and 2 in the 2023 season. So he's been fairly healthy throughout his career. Like, you don't have to worry. He's not, a rushing quarterback like we saw with Justin Fields this past year who can go down at any moment. And look, injuries can happen at any point, as I said, but the good news is you're not looking at someone in Geno who has like a crazy long injury history, and you need someone in place.
Traditionally, as we know, anything can happen here. So traditionally, yes, we'll just say that.
There we go. I want to talk about the story of the day, Antwan. David Bailey. I saw most of you guys had him at 3 sacks today. Obviously that's subjective in terms of like what is a sack because you're not actually taking the quarterback down in training camp. But nevertheless, he seemed to be wrecking the game, beating Armand Membu, beating Olufashinu. What did you see overall from David Bailey today?
Just, flash of speed and power, just the combination of it. And, what just him, I remember was one instance where it was against Membu and Brees Hall trying to contain him, double team him. And he just broke through both of them and, still got in Geno's face too as well. Like a lot of these, sometimes it is subjective as far as like sacks and all that. But I tell you what, like he was in Geno's face and it's, if it was a real game, it was one instance where they did like a bootleg and he came around the corner and, David Bailey was right there unblocked. I don't know whose responsibility that was, but yeah, he would have killed Geno if that was a real game. But one thing I am impressed, like he's still showing that tenacity and just the power and just kind of the bend that we saw in Texas Tech there, the ability to not only rush the passer but get tackles for loss and just create havoc in the backfield. So yeah, I think that's why the Jets took him because they felt like he was the more polished pass rusher. And so far, at least early on 2 days in, even though we're not in pads. So far so good. He's definitely looking like everything that the Jets thought he was, and probably even more.
Were there any plays that stuck out to you, better or worse for him against the run?
I mean, not necessarily. I mean, they kind of ran away from him a little bit too, as well. Like, and then we're on it's hard also to tell because we're like on the field level, so we can't necessarily see everything, how the plays are, diagram and all that stuff too. But, a lot of times I found that they were just running to the left side instead of him being, on the right side, which is where he mostly has been kind of lining up there so far. We'll see.
But what are your expectations just in terms of like overall production for him this year?
I mean, I think anytime you get a rookie and you can get 7 or 8 sacks, I think that's a really quality rookie year. I think anything more than that, I think you're talking about, NFL defensive rookie of the year and you're getting into that talk too. But, I think you just need him to be a compliment to Will McDonald, first and foremost, whether that translates into necessarily sacks or tackles for losses, anything like that. Because outside of Will, I mean, the Jets in general, like they had the second fewest sacks in the league last year. That's the 49ers. So you need somebody that not only Will to kind of step up his game there. He kind of had them in bunches in a few games out like Pittsburgh and Cleveland. You also need a guy like David Bailey, who I think would also help a guy like Will McDonald because he don't necessarily get double teamed as much too as well. So I think 8 sacks, maybe 9, is a good amount of total. I know a lot of people would say, maybe digits sacks, but that's hard to ask for, especially with the rookie and everything that kind of comes with. It's going to be some peaks and valleys throughout the course of his career. But if you told me he gets 8 sacks in his rookie year, I think that's a really good, successful season.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there 100%. I think a lot of it is going to hinge on his run defending ability and how he maybe improves there from Texas Tech. Because I mean, not only when you talk about the successful edge rushers in the league, right, Antwan, and like the best pass rushers in football, they're not necessarily the greatest run defenders as well, but they're at a level where they're not full-blown liabilities. And I don't know if David Bailey was essentially that. I mean, technically at that level last year at Texas Tech. I don't think he was that bad, but for him to be an every down player in the NFL, he's going to need to tighten that up and improve that. So a lot of it and his playing time is, in my opinion, going to hinge on how he improves or what he shows against the run.
I think also just the fact if the Jets can maintain leads. That's the thing. Like if they can't maintain leads, then it's going to be hard to put, especially late in the game where it's going to be a lot of running situations where you don't necessarily want to put him out there for those, like when teams are just kind of grinding out the clock and everything like that. So, it's going to be important for the Jets to get leads early in games. So that way, come third, fourth quarter, you can have a guy like Will McDonald and David Bailey who can, especially in those third down situations, pin your ears back, be able to get that pressure on the quarterback consistently.
Yeah, I think 2 free agent additions that have kind of flown under the radar to a degree, I think are really going to help the Jets are Joseph Osai and Kingsley Enagbare. They're not going to be 10-sack guys, but they graded out really well against the run last year. And I know everyone talks about the Jets' defensive struggles on the finish second to last in sacks, as you mentioned earlier on, Antwan, and the fact that they went an entire season without an interception. Also, let's not forget, this was a team that was the 4th worst in the NFL when it comes to stopping the run. Yeah, they were beat on the inside. They were beat on the outside. You bring in now T'Vondre Sweat, who's one of the best run stoppers on the interior. David Onyemata, who's going to play a rotational role there for you as well. And then Osayi Enagbare being able to shut things in from the outside. So I just think the Jets' run defending as a whole is going to improve drastically, particularly on the outside with Osayi Enagbare.
Yeah, especially when in a lot of those games, especially late in the season, where they were getting blown out by 23 points or more, teams would just run it like they would get up to a big lead and they start running the ball, and that's how you give up 140 yards rushing per game, which is I think it was 139 to be at 0.5, something like that. But yeah, I mean, yeah, you got to be able to stop the run like consistently, especially in the division that you play in, where especially if the winter gets cold, the weather gets colder and everything like that. You got guys like Devon Achane, you got Henderson with New England there, James Cook. So stopping the run is vital for the Jets' success this year, especially in their own division.
Yeah, I agree with you there 100%. And it's just like, if you can't stop the run, teams are just going to keep going back to that well. We've seen it for the past 2 straight years now. Like, when the Jets can't stop the run, teams just continue to obliterate that weakness. Why risk throwing an interception? Although clearly that wasn't that big of a risk last year, when you could just continue to go ground and pound with it and, gash teams that way. So I think stopping the run is going to be essential for this team. I think overall, the defense is going to improve. Like, there's no doubt about it. It was such a low bar that they set last year in every area. I think they got better just bringing in these established veterans like David Onyemata up front, Micah Fitzpatrick in the secondary, and then Demario Davis to kind of take control and leadership in the huddle at linebacker, with Glenn calling plays as well. What do you think the realistic expectation is for this defense in terms of like a finish around the league? Like 13th, 15th range? You think that's fair to expect something there? Like,
I think they could be average. I think they could be average. So yeah, around there. The thing is, what concerning to me is linebacker, the lack of depth there. Because if something happens to Mario Davis or Sherwood, then you are in huge trouble. Because you don't have anybody, that's a proven commodity. If something were to happen with those guys, so I also could see that being an area they kind of look at if somebody were to get cut in final cuts too, as well. Just add some more depth there, get a veteran guy just in case like something were to happen to one of those guys. Because Mario Davis is 37 years old, and he's been a model consistently throughout his career, 9 straight seasons of 100 tackles there, but at the same time, like, you have to plan for, just in case something were to happen. So, yeah, I think I can see that being an area too. The thing about Micah, like, I think he will improve the secondary, especially in the back end, just simply because of his knowledge and, everything that comes with him. What is concerning is, one, the lack of turnovers the last 3 years too. I believe he has like 3 or 4 the last 3 years, with the Dolphins. So yeah, I'm a little concerned with that. Can he get back to that level where we saw he was such a ball hawk early in his career, and both in Miami and also with Pittsburgh? If he can, then I definitely think that's a big time upgrade for the Jets too as well. But just to have his knowledge and wisdom, I think getting a lot of the leadership and the veterans, like, I think the Jets have a good mix of veterans, unlike they did last year, where it was really a young team.
Yeah. Another addition I really like, Antwan, when you talk about someone who could force turnovers, Dane Belton. I think he could be the team's starting strong safety to begin the year. Great on the ball production. And then, I mean, obviously the definition of that was Nashawn Wright, who led cornerbacks in interceptions last year. He's an interesting one, right? Because his coverage skills and just overall coverage was so poor last year that he couldn't be a starter. I could see him being anywhere on this Jets depth chart from CB2 to CB4, and I think it's largely going to hinge on his coverage ability. If he is able to put out that interception, just those sheer numbers in general, though, again, throughout the course of the year, the $3.5 million the Jets are paying him in guaranteed money, I think is worth the commitment on that tantalizing ceiling that he holds for his turnover ability.
Yeah, I mean, it's a low risk, possible high reward situation. I mean, you only committed to him for a year. So, yeah, kind of what you alluded to. Like, he's around the ball, like, always. So that's a good thing. But, there's a reason why he only got a 1-year contract. It's really because of the lack of skills there too, as well. Yeah. But I feel like the Jets are in a decent situation there. I haven't given up on AZ Thomas. Like, I thought he was playing solid. I thought he was ascending as a player a little bit before the injury last year. So, I'm curious to see just, how he continues to progress too, as well. You also got D'Angelo Pons and also Brownlee, who can kind of compete for the slot role too, as well. So, yeah, I think overall, I mean, it's not a lot of proving production there at the secondary, but also like it's a lot of potential there because I'm a big fan of
Yeah.
Pons. Like I thought he was one of the best corners in the nation last year, and then you can potentially have a battle between those guys, and also you talked about Wright and Thomas too as well. Those two will be competing for the outside spot opposite of Brandon Stevens, who's seemed like he's pretty locked in at that one spot.
You mentioned the concern with the linebacker depth a little bit ago, Antwan. Here's a name I'd keep an eye on. Patrick Queen. The Steelers could save $11 million by moving on from him at cutdown day. He hasn't been great the past few years. He hasn't lived up to that first-round pick, Pro Bowl pedigree, but you're not asking him to come to this Jets team and do that. If he could be an LB3 or 4 for you, and then that gives you at least somewhat of a proven commodity who you could pick up for cheap at cutdown day instead of having to rely on, Kiko Mawinoa and Michael Walker and guys of that nature in rotational roles.
That's a early ball, yeah.
Yeah, McCrary Ball, who is a special teamer, let's call it.
Yeah, special teams captain. But if you're gonna keep him, then you keeping him for linebacker depth too, because if something happens to him, like you're gonna have to put him out there. But it's like you are correct. But yeah, that's why I came up with my roster predictions, and I have them keeping 4 linebackers. But that could obviously change as time goes on. But yeah, I definitely think that's why I think it's vital to add more depth there, more somebody that's shown they can do it. They might be in the back half of their career, but somebody that can, if you need them to start a game or two, they can show that they can do that.
I was reading some of your tweets today and from just everyone who was at practice, and I heard there was an Arian Smith drop of sorts on a contested ball, that there was a bit of a dispute between you guys, whether it was a catch or not. What was your takeaway on that situation? How's Arian?
It's hard to see, like, right, I don't know if he held on to it or not. I thought it was a catch, but, nevertheless, if it wasn't there, it would be the second straight day he had a drop ball too. So yeah, he's a little bit of a guy you're talking about that had drop issues coming in from college at Georgia, and that's continued to be the case now, in the league too as well. But I think he'll have an opportunity to at least make the team on special teams. But yeah, he's gonna have to fight for his opportunity, like, because I think you have some depth there at wide receiver now. You got a guy like Tim Patrick there, obviously. Omar Cooper, A.D. Mitchell, obviously Garrett too. So yeah, he's definitely gonna have to fight for his role, his spot on the team, whether it be a reserve wide receiver or more of a special teams guy.
Speaking of failed day 3 picks so far from that draft class, you have Tyler Barron on your 53-man roster. What's up with him? I know he's on the pup list, but
I hadn't really. I'm be honest, I hadn't noticed him at all, so I really don't have much to give you on that.
No, I'm just saying, like, in terms of his roster status, like he's on the pup, so I mean, anything from him at training camp, but. He was my notable cut of sorts on my first 53 I did after OTAs. It's just, man, the edge room is packed with the free agent additions we talked about and drafting Bailey. He couldn't find playing time in such a poor edge room last year with injuries and everything of that nature. I know they traded up for him, but I feel like you just got to cut your losses.
I mean, you could be a practice squad guy, so you can probably see that.
Yeah, but I mean, it's tough to see him fit in because I don't think they're going to carry more than 11 defensive linemen. And then you have the versatility of, I remember, I don't think enough people have harped on this. I remember when AG spoke to you guys initially after the draft or earlier on in OTAs or whatever it was, and described Darrell Jackson Jr. as a big edge. That really intrigued me because this is a bigger guy who was really good against the run last year at Florida State, was better against the pass in 2024. If you plan to use him on the edge, that's a really interesting package you could kind of work out there, and then Sweat take on a lot of the nose tackle.
Yeah, I guess you have like heavy packages up front. Yeah, you can definitely have him and Sweat next to each other at the same time, which would be very interesting there, depending on what the opposite offenses lined up there. But I liked him. I like Jackson too as well. Like I say, not a lot of take away from Florida State season in 2025. They were horrendous, but he's one of the players that stood out there, transferred from Miami, and was really a force there. Especially as the run defender. And he's huge. I mean, 315, 6'5" there. So with Sweat being out, he's a guy that could really make a name for himself. Early on, and vouch for more playing time and snaps.
Something I'm so intrigued by is this time last summer, Antwan, Aaron Glenn, obviously competition was the word that he was living by, and he touted a center competition between Josh Myers and Joe Tippmann. Now, obviously, a lot has changed since then. AVT went down. Tippmann had a really solid year at guard, earns an extension subsequently. But do you think the plan is to just roll into the season with Josh Myers at center and that's it? No competition or anything. He's the center, Tippmann's at guard, and you're going with it that way?
They gave them ascension. So yeah, that's pretty much going to be the plan right there. I mean, look, I mean, I know a lot of people. I mean, Josh Myers is what he is. I mean, he's not, an all-pro center or anything like
Mhm.
that. I mean, but they felt like they liked what he did last year, especially after AVT
Mhm.
went down. They were kind of a bit of a pickle there, and Joe Tippmann. I thought he did a really serviceable job at right guard last year. So
Mhm.
did the Jets too. That's why you reward him with the contract
Yeah.
extension there. But yeah, I mean outside of Josh Myers, I mean, Josh Myers is your best center right now, unless it's Joe
Mhm.
Tippmann is going to start. So and they don't feel like they don't want to mess around with that. They want Tippmann to kind of focus on that one position,
Mhm.
which I do agree with. We already know he can play center if needed.
Yeah.
So you don't necessarily need to have that competition there.
Mhm.
You just have him play right guard and just focus on that. And then if something were to happen on the offensive line, you can maybe slide him over, if center, if
Mhm.
need be, if Myers gets hurt.
I've harped on this a lot in my writing this offseason. The offensive line depth as a whole, but particularly on the interior, really scares me, Antwan, because the Jets got a crazy level of luck last year, having all 5 guys out there for all 17 games. Let's be honest, if
It's
you're a
probably
betting
not going to
man,
happen
yeah,
again.
exactly. It's
That's
probably
just
not
the
going to
lower
happen again.
averages. Yeah, the
Yeah,
lower averages says it's probably not going to
exactly.
happen again. You just hope that it's not like it goes the complete opposite direction where you're
Mhm.
having, because I've seen it that way with Jets too, like where you have like, 13, 14 different combinations in 17 games or 11
Yes.
different offensive line. Yeah,
Mhm.
it's been crazy. So they had a great string of good luck last year. For them, they just hope it can continue. But yeah, it's hard to see all 5 offensive linemen
Mhm.
starting, back to back years for a team. Like
Mhm.
that would be impressive if it happened.
And the depth pieces concern me, right? Like Chakuma Okorafor was a free agent ad last offseason who they
Yeah.
re-signed. Okay, he's probably their best backup. Max Mitchell, maybe, but he can't be
I
relied
like
upon
I
as a
like Young from the Saints too. Like he came over. Like I think
yeah,
he
he has the most
started.
experience. He
Yeah,
started 3
yeah,
years
that's what
there.
I'm saying. I can see him making the team. Yeah, because he has to make some starting experience there, so you can plug him in and tackle for a game if need be.
Yeah, but then other than that, like Xavier Newman scares me. Not Landon Young, sorry, Cole Vow and like guys of that nature. It's just I don't know. I'm worried an injury happens to someone on that interior, and you're one snap away from having Xavier Newman slide in or Inez Cooper at guard. And Cooper, I'd actually be more excited to
I
see
actually
than
do like
Newman.
Inez Cooper. Like
Yeah, yeah.
I think he was solid at Miami last year. I think he gave up 1 sack. So actually, I think he would be fine. Like if you lose, if
Mhm.
more than that, if another injury would occur on the inside, then
Yeah.
yeah, you might be some trouble. But if Cooper, I think will be a solid, addition. He could play it for Parham or Titman if something were to happen to those guys.
What are your expectations overall for the offensive line? Like just in terms of where they could rank in the league?
I mean, you have 2 bookend tackles in Fashanu and Mimbu, so that gives you a leg up too. I think they could be a possible, top 10 to 15 unit there in the league too. I mean, you got 2 guys. I think Fashanu is going to have a, really
Yeah.
jump up this year too as well. Like he looks a lot, sturdier, like stronger upper body, but also like he
Mhm.
slimmed down a little bit too. It looked like a bit more athletic. So you got him. You got Armand Bimbu, who's coming off a really strong year too as well. I think he could also be one of the best right tackles already in football, to be quite honest
Mhm.
with you. So, but yeah, it's just about what the interior can do. Like Parham, I think him and John Simpson are kind of a bit of a wash there.
Mhm.
You would hope they can cut down on the penalties.
Yes,
Quite
definitely.
frankly, like that'd be the main
Definitely.
thing there. And then, Joe Tippmann was really good at right guard last year. So, and you already know we
Mhm.
got Josh Myers. We kind of talked about that. So, yeah, I think they
Mhm.
could be a top 10 unit potentially.
Yeah, I feel like that's kind of where the expectation has to be, right, Antoine? When you talk about 2 first-round tackles, not even just 2 first-round tackles, 2 top 11 tackles, a guard who you took in the second round, Josh Myers, who's the weak link, and I don't think should be starting and is getting paid backup money, and then Parham, who you just gave a sizable deal in free agency, right? So there are all these assets invested into the line. This is Olu's second year as a full-time starter. I think it's time for him to come on and like show us what he could do in terms of flashing the ceiling and improving against the run. And then, I mean, Membu was so good last year, Antoine. It's just if he can continue to just steadily improve and on that same trajectory, we could be talking about him next summer as a top 5 right tackle in football. I really don't think that's a reach
Yeah.
with how dominant he was last
I mean,
year.
I thought he was a top 10, player position last year. So,
Yeah.
I don't think that's necessarily out of the realm of possibility.
Yeah, no, definitely not. Quickly before we close, the positional battle that everyone wants to hear about, the kicking competition. What is I saw both guys went 3 of 3 today. You think York, Sanders,
Sanders missed a 47-yarder, but outside of that,
real
like
okay.
yeah, they were. I mean, they made everything else. Like he was the only one that missed there. But they did not kick on the first day of training camp, so this is
Okay.
the only day we could go on. So
Mhm.
I'm curious about see how Jason Sanders can he reclaim that glory that he had in
Yeah.
Miami, because I thought he was one of the better kickers in football up until his final year of Miami. Then he's kind of a little
Mhm.
bit inconsistent there. Obviously had the hip injury, didn't play
Mhm.
last
Mhm.
year, but if he can get back to that level, like he should win the kicking job, because Cade
Mhm.
York has kind of been really up and down throughout the course of his
Yeah.
career.
Yeah, York, 6 different teams in 4 years, just hasn't been able to find a steady home, missing kicks within 40 yards consistently. But at the same time, like you said, Sanders has been really good at his peak. Those injuries as guys start to reach like 30 years old, though, kicking wise, does scare me. Look at Graham Gano, for example, right? Like had that one hip or leg issue, whatever it was, and then they just kept on coming. So my
Yeah.
concern is they roll into the year with Sanders, and then you have 5 kickers by the time the end of the season by the time the end of the season comes. So I stand by that. I think one of their biggest mistakes this offseason was letting Nick Folk go. Like, why let him walk when you've had that level of consistency, not only this past year, but he's been the most accurate kicker in football the past 3 seasons now. So that still puzzles me to this day. But we'll see what
I think
happens
his
there.
age. I think his age.
Y-
I think they had to ask
mm,
themselves, like, can he do that again at his age? I kind of understand it, but yeah,
but he's done it 3
I
years
would
in a
try to
row
more give it.
now.
True,
He's
but again, like he's getting like I think he's 42 now, but yeah, I think he possibly could too. Like they just felt like I think
yeah,
ultimately they wanted to get younger at the position, and we'll
yeah.
see how that pans out. I would have drafted kicker. Like I was
Agreed.
pounding on the table for like a guy like Trey Smack or somebody like that.
Mhm,
If you're gonna start over, like go with somebody young, and that way you
mhm.
can kind of groom him, and he end up you
Yeah.
don't have to worry about the kicker situation for the next 4 years or so.
They had the UDFA from BYU for like 3 days, Will Ferrin, and then he got
Yeah.
cut. So we'll see what happens there. Thank you all for joining us. Hit like, hit subscribe. Appreciate your continued support right here on the channel. Antwan, thank you for taking the time as always. Of course, let everyone know where they can find you before we wrap things up. And then you got any final thoughts, football related, non-football related,
Uh,
feel free to share those.
People just find me at Antwan Staley on all social media platforms, and just my work at New York Daily News at nydailynews.com.
Love it. Follow Antwan if you aren't already. Great work covering the Jets. Only a handful of reporters are going to be out at training camp for the most part. I know the fans are going to be in attendance Saturday and some season ticket holders the days to follow. But follow Antwan and everyone on the Jets beat if you haven't already to keep up with what's going down in Florham Park. Nevertheless, that'll do it for us. For Antwan, I'm Connor right here on NY Flight Jets Talk saying have a great rest of your Thursday evening, everyone. And as always, JTS, baby. Jets, Jets, Jets. Peace out, folks.